Listen. Listen to me, all of you, for a moment. Now, we've had, well, a bad couple of days. I loved Davy, Jenny, Sean, Mac. They may be okay. We don't know. But we lost some folks. Now, if I could throw myself in the ground in their stead, I'd do it. Gladly. But we are gonna ride out and we are gonna find some food. Everybody, we're safe now. There ain't nobody following us through a storm like this one. And by the time they get here, well, we're gonna be long gone. We've been through worse than this before. Mr. Pearson, Miss Grimshaw, I need you to turn this place into a camp. We may be here for a few days. Now, all of you, get yourselves warm. Stay strong. Stay with me. We ain't done yet. Come on, Arthur.
All right.
Dutch Vanderlyn, a man whose life was filled with trouble, deceit, and crime. Born in 1855 to an English woman by the name of Greta, and an unnamed father of Dutch ancestry, Dutch had a normal childhood. His parents loved him, and they presumed he would grow up to be a normal man. However, anyone who knows American history well knows what happened in the 1860s. During the American Civil War, Dutch's father went off to fight the Confederates and was presumed dead after the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863, leaving Dutch fatherless around the age of 8 years old. The knowledge of his father being killed by Confederates left a deep-seated hatred for Southerners and those sympathetic toward the ways of the Confederacy. There is a bit of mystery surrounding Dutch's childhood, as he does not talk about it all too frequently. But from what is known, Dutch was quite the unruly child, constantly butting heads with his mother and never wanting to follow her rules, as he wanted his own freedom and to be his own ruler. This disregard for authority is what led him to run away from home at the age of 15. From this young age, Dutch willingly chose a life of crime and used a Robin Hood-esque facade of nobility to justify his crimes. He would also be very compassionate and caring to those abandoned and forgotten by either the society or the government. All of this and future events is what led him to form the Vanderlyn Gang. The theory that fits Dutch best has to be Bender's social learning theory. Now, before I explain why this theory fits him so well, I'd like to do a quick recap of just what the social learning theory is. For starters, the main idea from this theory is that people learn behaviors, whether acceptable or not, through watching the behavior and actions of others. It's pretty simple and it's almost self-explanatory theory, pretty much given in the name. However, there are a few more aspects about the theory that are important and needed to know in order to understand just how it connects to Dutch. One aspect of the social learning theory is that people learn that poor behavior has consequences and vice versa. Cognition, environment, and behavior all have an effect on each other. Most people often seem to develop a script of their behavior and make choices based on that, and with that, the observations made of the individual are often used to build upon or change their pre-existing script or model. But how does this all relate to Dutch? Well, as I mentioned earlier, Dutch was an unruly child, and given that his father died while he was very young, his mother likely had a very hard time trying to punish him, meaning that with the lack of punishment for bad actions, he almost had free reign to as much mischief as he would like. Next, I'd like to point out that he ran away at a very young age, one in which he would be very susceptible to the influence of others, as he slowly found himself on the path to becoming a criminal. He learned his ways from watching other criminals and their methods of robbing, looting, and smooth-talking their way out of punishments. It was within these younger years that he developed his Robin Hood facade, which, looking back on the information provided by the theory, would be his life script, and he bases his decisions off of that. A great example of Dutch utilizing social learning would be the story of how he met his partner in crime and his best friend Hosea Matthews. In the 1870s, roughly in his late teens or early 20s, Dutch crossed paths with a con man named Hosea Matthews. And to each of their surprise, they were both trying to rob each other. Dutch and Hosea, both impressed by each other's methods, decided to partner up and begin their long spree of crime. This is also where Dutch started the Vanderlyn gang. But it was during these early years of them being friends that Dutch learned a lot more about the execution and planning of heists through his corroboration and learning from his newfound friend. Another and my last example is of his short stint of friendship with a man named Colm O'Driscoll and his gang, the O'Driscolls, where Dutch both taught and learned more ways of efficiency within the crime world by watching how Colm acted and executed his crimes. While Dutch seems to almost directly follow the social learning theory, there is one theory that he seems to directly oppose, that being the evolutionary theory. Within the theory, it is believed that human behavior is based on natural selection and influenced by the experiences of our ancestors, that thought, behavior, and feelings are affected by evolution and gene selection. There are several reasons Dutch contradicts this theory, but the most notable one is that none of Dutch's family members were outlaws or troublemakers. Considering the theory suggests that behavior is passed down, it would be more realistic to assume that Dutch would be a hard-working and honest man like his parents. While there is not much information on either of his parents or grandparents, it seems that both of his parents were either immigrants or first-generation Americans, and back then, many immigrants were generally very hard-working as they came to the United States either to get away from a bad government, a poor economy, etc. So given all that, it is unlikely that any of Dutch's lineage were unlawful outlaws. While Dutch is a hard worker, like his family, his actions were not good and contradict what his family was likely working so hard for. Within the game, Dutch even talks about how him and his mother never saw eye to eye, always butting heads and fighting, further contradicting the evolutionary theory.
I left home at 15 and didn't see her again. She and I didn't always see eye to eye. I wasn't always a very obedient child.
I can only imagine.
Still, I loved her in my own way, and she me in hers. Somehow, even from the grave, she managed to have the last laugh.
There are many arguments about the limitations of this theory, and in the context of Dutch, I believe that his contradictions do highlight a few important limitations of the theory. The first being that the evolutionary aspect of psychology seems to have much less to do with human behavior and the complexities of socialization, and more so with the internal behaviors like survival instinct. Lastly, I would like to highlight that the nature versus nurture debate is a great way to look at this theory, the nature side being the more evolutionary aspect, as he has a good survival instincts, but the evolutionary aspect seems to play a little role in his personality and how he turned out, which seems to have a much greater role in nurture. It is safe to say that Dutch did not have optimal development in his youth. He grew up in the mid-1800s in a fictional part of the U.S., but in the real period of the United States history formerly known as the Wild West era. Looking back at that time, there was hardly any government, which meant hardly any law enforcement, which allowed criminals to get off scot-free from punishments so long as they were smart enough. It's not an intelligence issue with Dutch. He's a very smart man, often using his wits to his advantage. His main issue is arguably his lack of proper parental figures in a time like the Wild West. Considering he never got along with his mother and did not have a father around to raise him properly, it's no surprise that Dutch turned out the way he did. Things may have been different, however. There were ways to avoid his future and have a brighter one. Had Dutch not ran away at a young age, his father survived the war, and him get along better with his mother, he likely would have lived a normal life, not filled with crime, as any desire for deviance from the right way of living would have likely been shut down if he had those proper parental support figures. If this story were to occur in modern times, things likely would have been much different. To put it simply, with the expansion of the government and in turn law system, Dutch likely would have gone to juvie, jail, or prison a whole lot quicker than anyone from that Wild West era, and not been broken out due to the fortress-like prisons in today's world. Lastly, it's not too common to see children running away these days. Back then it was all too common. Things just worked that way back then. Kids would go off and do their own thing at a really young age. Kids would be working at 13. Things just aren't that way anymore. So he more than likely would have either ended up in the foster system or most likely had government assistance from his family, especially considering his father died at war, and nowadays government pensions to the families of fallen soldiers are more than livable. Healthy development is very important in becoming a good and contributing member of society, and unfortunately, there's not much for Dutch. From what is known, the only healthy aspect of his childhood is that both of his parents did have a deep love for him. However, given that his father passed away in war, and him and his mother always arguing regardless of how much he loved him, spelled plenty of trouble for his future. So while his childhood was mainly unhealthy, the healthy aspects of it were there, but unfortunately it was not enough to keep him on the right track. It is important to understand why exactly those aspects of his childhood were healthy and so important. Having loving and strong parents fosters so much healthy growth in children. Both parental roles teach male and female children the aspects of life. Fathers teach their sons to be men and provide for and protect their wives and daughters. Mothers teach their sons love, affection, and how to treat women, and their daughters how to be women and approach motherhood. The importance of having a strong mother and father figure in childhood is arguably the most important aspect of life. This, however, did not seem to be something Dutch had, which in turn severely threw him off course of being the man his family wanted him to be. Dutch van der Linde was a man who, from the perspective of Red Dead Redemption 1, was shrouded in mystery, as there was not much known of him besides the fact that the government was forcing John Marston to hunt down his old gang members and either arrest or kill them. But the prequel, Red Dead Redemption 2, showed much more of the gang right when it started to crumble, giving much more backstory of Dutch and his origins, allowing fans, writers, and students like myself to have a fun way of learning about both the storyline and, in my case, developmental psychological theories. Given the information, Dutch had a rough upbringing, fostering poor development, which led him down a dark path of crime, using aspects from Bandura's social learning theory to construct life scripts and learn how to be a better criminal through watching others. And lastly, using his charismatic personality to build up a gang and promise them everything, all for it to crumble down within months and have him on the run for almost a decade, just to meet his end at the hand of someone previously in his gang whom he left to die during a botched train robbery.
Hello again, John.
Hello, Dutch.
We gotta stop meeting like this.
Sure.
I got a plan, John.
You always got a plan, Dutch.
This is a good one.
I don't doubt it.
We can't always fight nature, John. We can't fight change. Can't fight gravity. We can't fight nothing. My whole life, all I ever did was fight.
Then give up, Dutch.
But I can't give up, neither. I can't fight my own nature. That's a paradox, John. You see?
Then I have to shoot you.
When I'm gone, they'll just find another monster. They have to. Because they have to justify their wages.
That's their business.
Our time has passed, John.